Okay, hi, how everyone. So today we're going to have a look at utility software. So what is utility software? Utility software can come with the OS or can be added on as well as the operating system. And it has two main functions. The first one is obviously to maintain the computer and to configure the system. Okay, so there's many useful utilities that are installed with the operating system, but we're going to look at some very specific ones. The first we're going to really look at is defragmentation utilities. Okay, so first of all, what is fragmentation? Fragmentation. Okay. Basically what happens, and this is really what we're talking about here, is hard disk drives. Okay, your traditional hard disk drives. Fragmentation is kind of a weird little concept. So I'm going to try and visualize it for you. It's probably the easiest way just to kind of visualize it. So you can imagine this is the surface of a magnetic disk, okay? And each of these little rows represents a place where a file or a piece of a file can be stored. And obviously the read-write head will scan over these and read or write to them. And we know this basic idea with them. So let's say I have one file, and this file is, it's an Excel file. So there it is. It takes up 4 of those chunks. Okay. And let's say that we have a music file, and it takes up 6 chunks. So what happens to the extra chunk? Well, it has to read it somewhere else. Okay. And then let's say we have, let's say we have, I'm trying to think about a giant file. Let's say you have you've got a Blu-ray movie downloaded or something. Okay. And that takes up many chunks. Okay. Okay. And then let's say we have, some pictures. And finally, let's say we have, something else. So each of those colors represents a different file. So here comes the problem. What happens if we delete this file? It leaves a for want of a word, 3-cell gap. Okay. And then the next time you come to write a 4-cell file, there's only a 3-cell gap, but it has to fill it. So it fills it with 3 pieces of the file, and the 4th piece of the file gets stuck somewhere else. And you can see as you delete, rewrite, and amend files, there's not enough space. Now, the best analogy one can use for this is what's called the cinema. The cinema example. Okay. There's rows in the cinema, and you often come in late to the cinema, and there's 5 of you, or you're a double date, or there's something going on, but you can't all sit together because there's not enough seats there. Okay. And so 2 you might have to sit here, and 2 you might have to sit there, and that doesn't, it's not a great experience at the cinema. You like to be all sitting together. Okay. So it's the same analogy here. You'd ideally like to have the whole file on the same line sequentially, so that when the read-write head goes across it, it doesn't have to go searching for the other bits of the file. So that's fragmentation. And the longer you leave a computer to do its thing, the more fragmented pieces will appear, because more gaps appear than there are spaces for your files. So it becomes very, very, very fragmented. Okay. Defragmentation software. What it does is every so often it runs, or you run it, and what it'll do is it'll reorganize the entire hard disk drive in order to best optimize and keep things together. So to use the cinema example, it's like just before the movie starts, the usher comes back in and looks and sees, okay, I'm going to have ye4 to move here, ye3 to move here, ye2 to move there, and ye5 to move there. And suddenly everyone's sitting beside who they're meant to be sitting beside. And that's the idea of it. So defragment software allows that to do it. And also, of course, what the most important thing, it frees up space, because if you're closing the gaps between blocks, it means that, you know, so for imagine a gap appears there, it's kind of useless on its own. But let's say there's a billion of those gaps scattered. If you bring them all together, then suddenly you have a lot more space to put another big giant file on. So that is actually quite helpful. And obviously it checks periodically to make sure none of these gaps are appearing again. So the defragmentation software, which comes standard with most computers, but you can get specialized one to do really deep defragmentation. They're very, very important. I suppose the next utility is one that you probably used a lot, especially if you're kind of into your computers, and that's backup software. Utilities. Okay, so again, most computers will come with standard backup, and most phones and most anything comes with, it's usually to the cloud now, it's all backed up. So what is a backup? Well, backup is just a copy of the files and settings. Okay, that's literally all it is. So that if anything goes wrong, you can re-clone your computer from the backup. It's the whole idea. It means the data can be recovered in the event of data loss, or in the event of a catastrophic virus or something like that. Okay, so it can, and of course data loss can happen for many reasons. You know, a thing can go on fire, theft, flood, malware, hardware failure, or even just you could delete a file that could cause everything to go crazy, although it's very hard to do that now unless you know what you're at. Okay, usually in the olden days what it used to create was rescue disks. Now we just put in a flash drive and just flash a copy to it, or keep one up in the cloud. A full backup, now of that, most backups just do the basics. A full backup will back up literally everything. Okay, but they use a lot of storage space. It can take a long time to create, but it's way faster to restore from it. That's the only thing. So you might only do one full backup in a year cycle, you know, and then a couple of mini backups of other data. But then you can have what's called incremental backups, where from the last date of the full backup, it just adds in the extra bits that have happened since then. Okay, obviously uses less storage space, and it's obviously much greater. Okay, quicker to actually build. On top of backups, the other ones I can think of possibly are compression software. That's the only other one I could think. Well, there's two actually. Compression software, where you're using things like zip, .zip, or was it rar, isn't it? .rar files to actually compress files for transport, and it's usually done across the internet. You don't really have to do it on computers, but if you're transferring across the internet, it's a handy way. Although I think it's gone out of fashion now because it's just easier to share through a cloud-based storage than to do zip and rar. But there's still places where zip and rar have their kind of. We don't leave insert go into how the compression actually happens, but it happens in a very similar way to the fragmentation, in that you there's algorithms that will take the data and basically snip out the extraneous bits, and it has a way of filling it back out. You know, tends to be zip, and rar tends to be used. Zip definitely tends to be used more with text-based or image or movie or sound-based stuff, whereas rar does tend to be used a little bit more for image and sound-based stuff. But they are what they are. The last one actually thinking of, it's probably the one most you never really think of, is encryption software. Okay. So encryption software, mostly won't probably have it on your computers. I mean, you'll have what you call software. You'll have you might have VPNs, or you might have antiviral stuff. But encryption software, most people just don't bother having it. They're not going down that far down that rabbit hole. But it is a thing that's there anyway. You can get encryption software to encrypt your data, to encrypt your device, the whole thing. There is some standard stuff that comes, like biometric stuff, that comes now standard with a lot of computers, but they're not proper encryption software. Proper encryption software, you have to buy it, and you have to know what you're buying. And again, I don't go into too much detail on it because it's not really on the course, but just to know that that's what it's for. Okay, it scrambles the data to stop third parties from really accessing it. That's what it does, and you can only decrypt it with a key. Okay, and I've talked plenty to you about in another video about keys. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.